So for this video, I'm going to be teaching you guys how to start embroidering. So for my last big project for this class, I made this piece right here, and it took a lot of hours of work, but honestly embroidery is, at least in my opinion, one of the easiest crafts to learn and start doing because it really just requires string, needles, and fabric, and you are pretty much good to just get going. I mean, you can use like patterns off the internet. For my purposes, these are all the patterns that I have. I'm kind of a serial pattern buyer. I buy new patterns anytime I see them, even though there's a lot of these that I've never used before. Most of the ones that I buy are these Aunt Martha's, and they're called iron-on transfers. So I'm actually going to show you guys what that looks like to put on. So this is my iron right here that I stole from my mom's house. And some of them are traceable ones, but I think those are a little bit harder. I mean, I have a shaky hand, so it's really hard for me to trace things really well. But I think patterns are super easy to put on once you get the hang of it. You just have to learn how to iron really firmly so that it doesn't move around. So you'll also need some needles. I have this tiny little set right here. I like ones that are about this size, maybe a little smaller. The key is to try to get them with a big eye. Otherwise, if you don't have a lot of experience with things like embroidery or sewing, you're gonna have a really hard time getting the thread to go through. For me, it's pretty easy now. These ones are the ones that I really like to use. You can't really see it obviously because it's small, but they have really small eyes, and I wouldn't recommend that for beginners, but the needle is easier to hold to embroidery. Sewing needles and embroidery needles are very different. You're not going to want to embroider with sewing needles because those are a lot heavier. And it's just really going to break your fabric more than it's going to put a pattern onto it. So then right here, I have a couple different size hoops, but really I work with this one the most just because I have really small baby hands, and so a bigger hoop, it's hard for me to get my hand to the center of what I'm working on. And then right here, you're gonna want a nice pair of fabric scissors. These were actually given to me by my grandma. They were her mom's, and she's kept them sharpened for my entire lifetime and more, so they're really good scissors. You're just gonna wanna get yourself definitely some fabric scissors. And then when it comes to string, you have so many options. I got this case from my grandma, but most little packets of string are gonna come in just the long rounds. So you're just gonna wanna get a couple of these little holders and wrap it around, and it does help to write like the number of the color on it so that you know exactly what color you have. So you don't wanna mix up your colors. These are all the colors that I have. It's my ID card. And yeah, you just get more colors as you go because obviously there's going to be different colored things. This was all different kinds of colors, and it's just your own collection that you make. These little bins are super cheap. You can get them from like Joann's or something simple. Okay, so now I'm going to actually show you guys some embroidery. So how to start it off is you just thread through the needle. When you have your string, I normally use 2 strands and I break it apart. So right here is the string that I'm going to use, and I just take 2 of the little strands, break it apart, and then separate it, and that is going to make a pretty fine line. You don't really want to use the whole thing, otherwise it's just going to make a really thick line. So if you're doing heavy embroidery, yeah, that's fine, but for just delicate little lines, you're going to want to use like 2 strings. Then you're just going to tie a little knot on the end and secure that, and then cut off the tail, and you are ready to go. So now this is just a piece of scrap fabric that I had. So you're just gonna put the hoop over the fabric and tighten it up so that it's tight right here. Otherwise it's gonna be harder to embroider. And then you're just gonna stick your needle up through the middle and then pull it out. And now this is like, I guess, the hard part. So you press what finger is this? Your ring finger? Your index finger. Your index finger up underneath. And then you're gonna put the needle down and then pull it back up through. So it's not going completely down, it's not going completely up. And then you pull it through, and that's 1 stitch. And then I'll show it to you again. So you're gonna go down, and then you're gonna come back up, and this is how it looks. and then you're gonna pull it all the way through. And then you just keep going, and you can do this in circles, you can do it in lines. I don't have a pattern here, so as you can see, I just doing a little bit of a straight line right here. And that's pretty much the easiest stitch that you can do in embroidery. You can get way more complicated, you can do cross stitch, but this is pretty much the basis for how I did my entire piece. And it's really just a good starter stitch for anyone who's starting to embroider. So I hope you guys learned something, and I hope you guys can create your own stuff too.